No matter your take on marijuana legalization, law enforcement is a major portion of the debate. Marijuana arrest records are highly analyzed and scrutinized, leading the Times editorial board to call them racist. But law enforcement officers also see firsthand the worst-case scenarios that marijuana can contribute to and how legalization might conflict with their main mission, public safety. We wanted to ensure that the views and concerns of law enforcement were included in our conversation tonight. So earlier today, I sat down with Michael Ranalli. Michael is the chief of police in Glenville, New York. He's also the president of the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police, a group that opposes the legalization of marijuana. Chief Ranalli, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Why the opposition to legalizing marijuana for you and for the police chiefs of New York State?
Well, a lot of it is based on history, and just to clarify, the State Chiefs Association, New York State Association of Chiefs of Police, is not categorically opposed to all aspects of any, like for instance, the medical marijuana bill that did pass. We did have concerns that we conveyed to the governor's office and did appear to be addressed. The smoking versus the final version that allowed the. So we're not. It's not a matter of no for the sake of no. It's a matter of, I don't think we are anywhere near there yet. I don't think Colorado was. I don't think Washington was. I've been in the business for 30 years, and many of my fellow chiefs have been around for a long time. And we started at a time period where DWIs, driving while intoxicated, a lot of fatalities on the roadways because of alcohol use and abuse. And there wasn't, now everybody's used to all the publicity, the MADs and the groups and the SADs and the money that's spent on advertising for the dangers of drunk driving, the grant money available through federal and state sources for additional DWI patrols. Mm-hmm. It's become part of our cultural norm to know that that's not appropriate. Well, when we started, that wasn't the case. A lot of people drank and drove. And as a result, a lot of people died, and a lot of accidents, a lot of property damage. And it was because our culture at the time wasn't, as I said, wasn't really prohibiting it. And what I see now, what many of my fellow chiefs see now, is that there's a couple of different things driving the culture and the viewpoint, and the polls, the people are in favor, mm-hmm. because I don't think they fully understand exactly what they're giving an opinion on. In other words, what the ramifications of it are. There's been a lot of publicity about the actions of police, and without getting into right, wrong, or otherwise, what has happened is that a lot of people that have been found in possession of marijuana are viewed more as victims of police, of the laws, of outdated laws, because it's just pot, and capital J, capital P, just pot. It's not a big deal. People feel, because it's different than alcohol, it leads to a little bit more mellowness, and as compared to the effects that alcohol can have, domestic abuse and fights and so forth. So so with that in mind, if we were to go, as Colorado did right now, to full legalization, there's nobody speaking for the citizens of the state that are driving their cars and walking on the streets, and there's no dialogue for their protection, and not that we're seeing.
You think there's a legitimate public safety concern that public safety will be jeopardized if marijuana is legalized?
Listen, you can call it just pot, you can call it whatever you want. It is a drug that affects the human brain. The human brain is an incredibly complex organism. It's incredibly complex, and the way it works, anytime you have an outside source affecting it, you're going to have some problems. One thing that I think a lot of people would have a hard time saying or objecting to is the fact that in one way, shape, or form, marijuana does affect your your brain. It does affect the way you function. Specifically, alcohol is more obvious in your motor skills, in your complex motor skills, whereas with marijuana, it's a little more insidious. It's more in your ability to make decisions and pay attention to different things.
Are your concerns more vehicular related in terms of people driving under the influence, or is it a general overall living their lives and impacting?
Well, both, really. First and foremost, though, when you live in the law enforcement world for 30 years, especially in suburban police departments, vehicular traffic is huge. I mean, everybody drives, everybody gets around, so you don't want to go. You don't want to see lives ended and all the lives around that dead person being destroyed because of it.
Is there an enforcement mechanism that would make you feel better about that, the same way that we have breathalyzers and DWI check stops now for alcohol?
Not at the time, and I don't see one in the immediate future, because law enforcement in Colorado is struggling with that right now. It's different. When officers are trained to do standardized field sobriety testing, first and foremost, that was primarily targeted for alcohol and the effects that alcohol. And again, as I said, it's a little more obvious in your complex motor skills, where with marijuana impairment is not as obvious, and you can still see slight indicators, but what you're going to see is, you're going to see somebody, you're giving them instructions, like say to hold up your foot and count or whatever, and somebody with alcohol will just do it and won't do it very well, that are intoxicated. Somebody that may have smoked marijuana will be able to do it to a certain point, but may sit and look at you and not understand the instructions, or it may take a while. And the point is, too, that alcohol, because of all the science and studying, alcohol is more quantifiable in the sense of, you know, somebody my size, I know I can go to dinner and I can have this or that. With marijuana, you have no such quantifiable effect.
I want to get to this quickly, because you and I talked before this interview about arrest ratios and arrest numbers. I've done some reporting in New York City where something like 88% of the arrests for marijuana possession were for Black and Hispanic residents. You were telling me it's decidedly not the same ratio, not the same case upstate, and there's a concern that you feel police get painted with too broad a brush on this front?
Yes, I don't know what did or did not happen in other jurisdictions. I can speak from my own experience that you know, we do not have the same, especially in most upstate suburban rural areas, you do not have the same concentrations of people and street crimes. Much of our drug arrests stem from traffic stops, where you will get the odor as you pull a car over. It's pretty obvious. You get the strong odor of burned marijuana coming out of the car. That's where most of our comes. You don't even know what race, sex, whatever the person is typically until the car is pulled over.
We're going to continue this conversation on the web, but Chief Michael Ranalli, I want to thank you very much for joining us and for making the trip.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, that's just a portion of my conversation with Chief Ranalli, president of the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police. There is much, much more available on our YouTube page. Just search YouTube for Richard French Live and click videos. Jill, I saw you taking a lot of notes as to what the chief was saying. I'm curious your reaction.
Well, I don't think that I think he's actually made a case for legalization and regulation.
How so?
Instead of a case for prohibition. Well, he talks about drunk driving and DUIs and how it used to be, what did he say? It was
like a cultural norm.
It was a cultural norm. It was a joke. People used to make jokes about it. Oh, you know, someone told me, you know, if you're driving drunk and you see 3 roads, just stick to the middle one. That's how you know. And it was a joke in her family. And so what happened was, we didn't ban alcohol. We had, you know, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. They're an advocacy organization. The culture shifted because people started looking at it differently, because advocacy organizations talked. He talked about roadblocks and increased policing around driving, which was effective. And the culture has changed without banning the substance. And similarly with tobacco. Everybody used to smoke. You used to be able to, you couldn't go out to a bar without it being full of smoke. And now smoking has gone down because of education efforts, because of advocacy efforts, not because we prohibited smoking. We banned it in certain places, but we did not make that substance illegal.
If those cultural organizations aren't in place yet, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving version for marijuana, or even the regulatory systems that are still coming into play in places like Colorado and Washington, if they're not in place, do they need to be fully in place before legalization can be implemented, or is it something that needs to happen as the process goes on?
Well, I just think it's time to end prohibition because of all the negative impacts that prohibition has, and we can talk about those later. But I just don't agree with him that there isn't a culture in place right now that says you don't drive high. Nobody says you should smoke marijuana and get in a car and drive. Everybody says you shouldn't. Different ballot measures and different legislative different laws that are being enacted with respect to this all talk about drunk driving or driving while impaired and leaving the current laws in place for that. And the officer, or the chief, I believe he was, was giving a very clear explanation of how you tell when somebody's high on marijuana. You can tell. You pull them over and you can actually tell. So it's not like you can't tell. I mean, I just don't think that that's an argument for prohibition. I haven't heard an argument for prohibition yet.
Ellen, the chief also mentioned that impairment when it comes to marijuana isn't as obvious, let's say, in a traffic stop as it is with alcohol. Mm-hmm. Is that because it's just harder to see, or is it because people are less impaired?
No, it's because the police don't have the technology to measure it. It's not like a breathalyzer. We don't have all the refined tests.
Would that alleviate your concern if there was a test that was equivalent to a breathalyzer for marijuana?
No, it wouldn't alleviate my concerns. My concerns are that marijuana stays in your system for up to a month. Pilots aren't allowed to fly on Monday if they smoked marijuana on Saturday because it affects their perception. In Colorado, before marijuana was legalized, when it was just medical marijuana was available, between 2007 and 2012, fatal car crashes decreased by 15%. Fatal car crashes where the driver was impaired by marijuana increased by 100%. I think that says it all. And if marijuana is legalized, we are all going to be victims. We are all going to be in danger of being struck and possibly killed by a driver who's used marijuana and whose perception and judgment are impaired.
Jill, quickly, I can give you the last word in this segment.
Well, it's just not true. I mean, pilots, first of all, pilots aren't allowed to, I don't think pilots are allowed to have marijuana in their system at all. So that's actually just not true. The metabolites of marijuana stay in your system for a long time, but that doesn't mean that you're impaired for that amount of time, or that the impact on your cognitive function stays for that amount of time. That stays for just a few hours and it's done.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Up next, medical marijuana. Do the same arguments against recreational pot also hold for marijuana as medicine? Should it be more widely available? And what about the states in our region and the strict guidelines they've established on medical marijuana in the name of preventing abuse? That's next. Stay with us.